This October, Yumiko introduces the Unity Collection. Yumiko acknowledges and supports the inclusive future of dance. With playful stripes and creative color palettes, the Unity Collection celebrates diversity united through movement. Check out the various options available in the fan favorite Alicia and Sofiane styles. Limited quantities are available. As a reminder, the New York flagship store is open for business with limited hours to suit all your needs, whether still training at home or in the studio. Stay tuned for new releases, live events, and all things Yumiko at yumiko.com and at Yumiko on Instagram. Before we get started today, we wanted to let you know that we will be taking a short time off from Conversations on Dance due to other work commitments. This will be our last episode until the middle of November. We are hoping to make it up to you with some extra bonus content in November, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, be sure to connect with us on social media at Conversations on Dance. One more note. During the editing process of this episode, we realized that we had some background noises that were not apparent to us while we were recording. While we tried our very best to edit the episode as much as possible, we appreciate your patience with us as we do at-home Zoom recordings. Enjoy the episode, and we can't wait to be back with you in November. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
Today we are joined by Leslie Andrea Williams, chorus dancer with the Martha Graham Dance Company. Leslie was born in Newport News, Virginia, and grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. She joined the Martha Graham Dance Company just 2 months after graduating from the Juilliard School in May of 2015. Since then, she has performed numerous featured roles in iconic Graham ballets such as Chronicle, Appalachian Spring, Diversion of Angels, and Embattled Garden. She was recently featured in Dance Magazine as a dancer on the rise. Today, we talk with Leslie about her training, her transition to the Graham technique, and her time with the company.
And we are going with Leslie. Hello, Leslie.
Hi.
We're so happy to have you.
Oh, this is such a pleasure. I'm so happy that I could do this with you guys. I'm a fan of you two, especially since meeting you, Rebecca, in Vail.
I know.
So I was like, yeah, I would love to do this podcast.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Thanks for asking me.
And
yeah.
the people at home cannot see this, but you look stunning today.
Yeah,
did you,
so beautiful.
Did you get did for us? Because you look amazing. And I'm just sitting here like in the shirt I slept in.
You know, if you look good, you feel good.
That's
my
right.
philosophy.
That's true. That's true.
Girl, you're right.
Sometimes I would literally just get dolled up just to go to my living room, honey, and
yeah,
it helps.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really important. We were just talking about how food helps too.
Yeah.
And for me, it's more food helps, and I don't ever put on makeup, and I only put on makeup for Zoom calls these days, I feel. So just did it like 2 seconds ago before we got on this call.
And for me, it's running. I run literally running away from my problems. That's what we all have our coping mechanisms, which we were supposed to get to at the end of this interview because we've been talking a lot about that. But we'll circle back.
Okay.
But let's go back to the beginning. Leslie, when did you first fall in love with dance and start to develop an interest in dance in general?
I guess when I realized that I could I was kind of good at it, and I realized that I could maybe do it not as a profession, but I could keep going with it for a long time because I had started dancing when I was 3 years old.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're young, you're just going and doing it because it's fun and, you're just basically like running around a studio and all of that. But I always sort of picked up on choreography and dance combinations. Even when I was young, like there's this one really great video of me when I was like 5 doing a dance recital. And they had the 2 like older girls in the front, like doing the choreography, and all the younger girls were following them. And if you like the camera pans over, and while everyone in the back is sort of struggling to follow, I am 2 counts ahead of the people in the front.
That's right.
So,
you know what comes next.
So I knew my choreography. So I realized pretty early, I guess, that this was something that I was good at. But then when I started doing it very seriously, around like maybe like 9, 10. I was, taking classes on Saturdays, just at the studio all day, neglecting my studies.
as we do.
That's when I realized I was like, I really love to dance, and I feel like I'm good at it. So I feel like this is something I should just keep going with.
Yeah. Have you continued to have a strength for learning choreography and knowing what comes next? I always wonder if that's where you're going to ask you, Michael.
No, I know the answer to this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was
worked with Leslie. The answer is yes. If you
She's giggling and saying yes.
Yeah.
It's really true because I'm the type of person that like always kind of goes ahead of the count as opposed to like on the count, because it helps with Graham too, because you have to like anticipate a lot.
Right.
But I'm definitely that person that's like, I know my steps.
That's awesome. I love that.
So what was your training like at this point when you said around 9 or 10, you got a little more serious or started to think of it a little bit, you were doing it all day Saturday. So where were you training, and what was like the sort of focus of this training at that point?
So the focus was mainly ballet. So I was, I started dancing when I was 3, and I was in Virginia, and then I moved to North Carolina when I was like 7, and I was with like Cary Ballet Conservatory, which was like in Cary, North Carolina. And then I went to, as I got older, I went to Raleigh School of Ballet, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that's where I really was doing the Saturday classes, really getting serious. That's when I was about 8 or 9, and then they had this division off of the school called Raleigh Dance Theater. It's like their school company, and that's when they were really sort of treating us like we were young professionals, rehearsing every day, performing in theaters, and then the rehearsals on Saturday. And then after Raleigh School of Ballet, I went to North Carolina School of the Arts for ballet. So that was like full-time professional. Right. Yeah. It was.
Is that the point where you felt like you were seriously thinking about a career in dance?
I got to School of the Arts.
Right.
That happened. Yeah.
And were you were clearly focusing your dance training on ballet. Was that like your mindset also for your professional career too?
No, I think I realized at a certain point while I was at School of the Arts that ballet is not necessarily where I saw myself going. Not because I didn't love it, but I realized once I started taking more contemporary and modern techniques, I realized that my way of moving sort of matched with those techniques a little bit better. Although I still love ballet, I felt like physically, the physicality of the movement just sort of matched more with how I danced, also how my body was, my body type. Also, I was sort of encouraged by some of the contemporary teachers at School of the Arts to switch over to the modern program when I was at School of the Arts because there were separate concentrations, but because of Ethan Stiefel was our dean at the time, he mixed the concentrations with classes. So if you were a ballet concentration, you were required to take, all the techniques that they had for modern composition, all that stuff. And then if you were a modern dancer, you took ballet point, ballet partnering, all that. So it was nice. It was cool that I got to sort of experience everything and realize that I think professionally, if I was going to do this, it would make more sense to have a little bit more in my repertoire of skills.
Right.
Just ballet.
And did you take Graham classes there as well? Is that where you first had Graham introduction?
No, I didn't. I did not have Graham until I got to Juilliard.
Okay.
So let's talk about Juilliard for a second. What was that always a goal for you, or is that just something that fit in? You're saying like you were getting all these different kinds of classes at School of the Arts, North Carolina, and then Juilliard is like that on a next level. Like the number of things you guys perform the range of things that I've seen Juilliard students perform is just kind of nuts. So was that just something that you liked and thought that would click with you?
Yeah, I think the thing I like about Juilliard, it really helped one become a well-rounded dancer. And, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do in dance. I just knew that I wanted to dance. And I knew that it wasn't just ballet. So by the end of School of the Arts, by the time I was graduating, I actually wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to go, but I knew I wanted to get an education. So my mom actually told me about Juilliard. It wasn't something that was necessarily on my radar. I knew about it. And then I looked into it and I was like, this is perfect because you not only get very serious ballet training, you also get serious ballet training serious training in all other techniques and styles. So I wanted to explore where else I could go.
Right.
So Juilliard was great for that.
So was this first Graham experience at Juilliard, was it like a love at first step, first contraction? Or was this something that you kind of grew to love? What was that development like for you?
About Graham or just
Graham, like that specific, because you were saying that was the first time you had taken a Graham class was at Juilliard, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and say no. It was not love at first contraction at all. It was more like, what is this? Because, I came from the ballet background, so like I was doing other styles, like Graham is so specific and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you're on the floor for like an hour and then you stand up and you're like, it's just, it wasn't clicking with me quite yet. And even though I had an amazing teacher, I found that I appreciated like the imagery of it, the emotion, the emotionality, connecting with, what's around you, being super aware. But technically, I found it was really hard for me to get into right away.
Right. I love that you brought up the specificity of it because we had so many great conversations while working at Ballet Collective together about like Graham is every bit as specific as, the Balanchine background that most of the people on that gig came from. And so it was just so illuminating and really interesting to hear you talk about like how specific a Graham hand is or like what an actual like motivation behind something is and why it should look the way it should look. I love all of that. Is that part of what appealed to you?
I think the specificity of the technique was not something that I really was aware of until I joined the Graham Company.
Okay.
But what I knew was that the emotionality, I knew that, the connection of a pleating was the idea of like a deep-seated emotion in the body. The pleading is like it's literally, they call it a pleading because you're literally like pleading, like, please, you're really expressing a feeling, which is what causes you to do the step. When, for instance, like when we were doing the pleading exercises, Therese, our teacher, would always say, feel like you're on warm sand on a beach, or feel like you're in a grassy meadow and the sun is beaming on you. And that's what you're feeling when you're pleating, or when you do like a fourth position, turns around the back, you feel like your fingers are wading over a pool of water. And that's what makes you, that's how you move your hands, it's things like that. The imagery I totally connected with, and I understood how that was connected to the technique. But the technique element, that didn't make sense to me until later when I took it.
This is like going slightly off track of what we're talking about, but how many of those sorts of imagery moments come directly from Martha Graham, and how much do people kind of put their own interpretation in it when they're passing it on?
I would say it's unclear, but I think the reason why a lot of amazing, legendary Graham teachers have this imagery most likely is because they worked with Martha and she sort of passed down that information to them. Also, there are other teachers that worked very closely with Martha, like Yuriko and Pearl Lang, that had very specific ways of teaching the technique that are different, from say Therese Capocilli, for instance. I'd say it's unclear, but I want to believe, because I didn't know Martha personally, I want to believe that the way she choreographed anything was definitely based on a pure emotion. But I only think that because what you see in the choreography is what informs the technique, I could only think that it's affirmative, like absolutely.
Right.
The imagery is such a big part of it. And when I take class, some teachers are very strong on imagery and emotion, and then others are very strong on technique. So I think it's a mix.
Yeah.
Right.
It kind of makes me think, Michael, don't you think a little bit of the stories we hear about Balanchine is that in some ways he would leave things kind of open to the dancers' interpretations, and then the originators would kind of create stories for themselves, and then they pass that down. But like you're saying, it was in the choreography for them to interpret it that way. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah, the Graham legend is so cool. I mean, it's it's so it reminds, of course, we were from the Balanchine background, but like it's like her quotability and like her intelligence and like cleverness and all of that is just it's so fun to think about. It just feels like, since we weren't there, imagining like what that must have been like to be in her realm when she's,
I've read a few books where it's like, well, when I was in the room with Martha, she was an enigma. Like, the way people describe Martha and like these books, memoirs, things like that, everyone, the conclusion is that Martha is a sentient being, but the way people describe her is always it's so different, and when you try to cut and paste to sort of like get your idea of Martha, you're just kind of like, this woman is crazy.
Wild.
In a good way,
Yeah.
It's crazy. And also the way she creates, like over time, I know she was going through different periods of exploration when she was creating work, and dancing. So it's just like, who was this woman?
Right. Yeah.
So interesting to get to know someone kind of like through their work. I think like Michael and I say, like Balanchine wise, it's the same thing. It's like every time we would do a different piece of his from a different time, it's like you learned something new that you put in a piece of your puzzle. And again, it's like just knowing them through this piece of art that's still sort of alive. It's so cool.
So what was the first Graham work that you got to perform?
The first Graham work that I got to perform was at the Juilliard School. I did Dark Meadow. And that piece was a great piece to have as my first Graham piece, because it is based very specifically in the human experience, the human psyche. And it's very like mythological. I had done 2 years of Graham at Juilliard, and then we weren't doing Graham anymore. And then Therese Capocilli got the chance to do Dark Meadow for our spring repertory concert. So that's how we ended up doing Dark Meadow, and then I was picked to be a lead. So that was really cool.
So wait, I find that interesting that there was kind of like, I was going to ask how often you were doing Graham at Juilliard, but maybe not that often. And then there was a period of time where you took a break as well.
Yeah, it was not very often. Like Graham was not on my radar at all until senior year when I did Dark Meadow. And it was such a wonderful experience that it led me to want to audition for the company. Because they were hiring and they could see the show and the directors, I mean.
Right.
And I was like, wait, this was such a great experience. And I felt like I did, a good job. And I felt like I learned so much about myself and about my dancing that I feel like this would be a great next step.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how did you secure that?
How did I secure that? So I guess, the Graham directors came to a Horton class at Juilliard my senior year, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just give them my resume. I was like,
Mhm.
hi, I'm Leslie. Like I didn't know like what the vibe was. And they were like, oh, thank you. You were in Dark Meadow, weren't you? And I was like, yes, I was. And they're like, oh, we saw you as She of the Ground. You were lovely. And I was like, thank you.
Aw.
Like, oh my god. So we did the Horton class, and one of the teachers at Juilliard was like, the directors from Graham, they really liked you. And I was like, and then I got invited to the audition. So that was really cool. And I was like, yeah, I will definitely, absolutely go to the audition. And I think what solidified me wanting to be in the company is actually a week before the audition, they had this pre-audition workshop where you could like take class and learn the rep and just get to know like the space, the teachers. And in that week, I mean, I don't even think I did the whole week. I think I did like 2 or 3 days. But in that week, I was like, I love this. This is amazing. And the audition was great because everything that I did in the workshop is like the same stuff that we did in the audition. So it was like it was perfect because Graham is something you definitely have to like refresh your memory on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So especially if you had only done it your first and second year of college. So I was like, thank God for this workshop because I don't know if I would have felt as confident going into the audition.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what was the audition process?
Well, it was like 2 days. 2 days. So you start out with a ballet class, which I think is a new thing because I think the company was really looking for more like versatile dancers. So we start with the ballet class, and that was really funny actually because we had Peju Chenpat, who is like Graham principal star, and she is very flexible. And she has like a very strong like ballet background, obviously. And she starts, the first combination is an adagio. So it's literally like développé and then promenade with développé in second. And all of us are in like unitards. Some people don't even have ballet shoes. Like people were just like, what is the, like
what's going on?
Expecting to do this at a Graham audition,
right?
And so I was like, I was fine, and then we did, and then we did. I actually brought ballet shoes. I mean, like,
yeah, you did. That's right.
Fashion queen.
Anyway, so we did that, and then we did a Graham combination, which was like super hard. And then we went into the rep portion. We were separated by height because most of the rep is very based in heights. So I did a solo from Embattled Garden, the role of Lilith, which is what I ended up doing in the company. Which is really cool. And that one was really fun. It was very like sassy and sensual. And then we did Chronicle, and that was a big one because we had to do the fugue sequence, which was like a lot of jumps. And then we had to do one of the hardest steps in Graham technique, which is a jump in second into a contraction sit to the floor. And that's like, it's literally one of the hardest steps. And if you don't
I just tore my ACL in my head.
or your hamstring, it's like either one. So it's like, it's super hard. And we had to do that first day. And I'm like, what is this? But I did my best. And so then the second day we did like Rite of Spring rep and just lots of rep, but it was a long 2 days. And at the end of the 2 days, we did this piece by Adonis Phoniadakis. It's a contemporary piece that the company did. And it's this duet, which is really crazy in terms of it's like twisting. There's a part where the girl's arm is twisted behind her back and the guy has to lift her while she's twisted like upside down in this position, and they have to spin, and I have really crazy shoulders, so we kept rehearsing this one weird lift with the shoulder behind the back, and it felt like my shoulder was being ripped out of its socket.
Oh no.
And that might have had to do with the partner I had. I mean, it's hard to know for sure. Because it's a very hard step. But also, like, I feel like once I did that piece in the company, I was like, okay, it wasn't feeling like this in the audition.
Right.
But it's a hard step either way. So, yeah, I felt like my shoulder was literally ripping out of its socket.
Oh no.
And then by the end, because I just kept going, because I was like, we're almost done. At the end, I started crying. And Lloyd Knight, who was teaching the step, he comes up to me and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, my arm. And I had to stop. And she went and got like a bag of peas from the freezer in the kitchen, the dancer lounge. And I was icing my shoulder for the rest of the audition. It was like right at the end. I didn't even do it for everybody. But I was like freaking out because at the end they called me back in and I was just sitting at this table with like the director, the associate director, everybody. And I was like, icing my shoulder, like tears, like eyes all red, you know. And they're like, we'd like to offer you a contract with the company. And I was like, you know, like crying, slash smiling, slash, you know, it was a mixed bag of emotions. So that was, it was a crazy audition.
Just like that, huh? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Were they offering anyone else spots like that just right in the moment, or is that normal?
Think so. I mean, it was more like because they needed me specifically for some parts that they needed filled for like some shows we were doing.
Like immediately.
Yeah, immediately. So,
that's so
I
cool.
guess I was the right woman for the job.
Wow, that's great.
So then, what were those early days like? Like, how did company life stack up against maybe what your expectations were, or like, you know, the dreams of being in a company? Especially with new technique too. Yes.
Yeah.
I was very nervous. Actually, I was very anxious about getting started because I knew that my gram wasn't like up to par. So I was really concerned that I was going to have a hard time, but I felt like there was some sort of trust that the directors sort of had towards me because I think they really just needed spots filled. And I think that they saw something in me enough where I could, you know, learn quickly enough to go on stage. And that was the case. I mean, one of the first Graham roles that I learned was a soloist part. So I had to really like get it together. And I had a lot of private sessions with Denise and you know, just basically figuring it all out as I went. But when I first started, we weren't even doing a lot of Graham. We were doing more contemporary stuff. And I was like, okay, like I got this.
Right.
But it still was hard not to feel like you didn't quite fit in with these people because you're just like, they've all been established. I'm like the only new one right now. Like, I just felt very much like, who am I jiving with?
Right.
The only person I felt was, well, I'm not going to say that, but I feel like Lloyd Knight, because he's a principal. So he's like, you know, he seems like unreachable, but he actually is like the nicest guy ever.
Right.
So when you have someone like that, that's super welcoming and comforting, you know, that really helped me. And also I had Blakely White McGuire, who is a former dancer with the company, principal, legend. I remember her pulling me aside and being like, Leslie, it's okay. You got this. You know, just like keep going. And I'll never forget that because it was literally like the first or second day. And I was sort of getting a little bit like, stirred by everything that was going on because I was filling spots. So everyone knew the choreography and I was sort of learning it. But there was a second cast learning it, but they were familiar with the piece. But I really was like new. So when you have people like that sort of helping you, encouraging you in the company, that definitely made me feel comfortable.
Right.
And that's where that need to understand choreography and getting to know it really quickly came into play, I'll bet, and was really helpful for you. How much, you mentioned working with the ballet masters kind of in private sessions. How much do the dancers also help you with like the technique part of it and kind of like help lead each other in that way too?
Oh, it's a big part of how the company works. Dancers helping out with teaching parts, coaching. It's a big part of how the company runs because our rehearsal director, Denise, she's the only one. So, I was new, so she needed to definitely help me. Otherwise, I was going to go on stage looking crazy. But later, when we were doing things like Rite of Spring, where there was a lot of core parts and things like that, she, had to focus on other things. So there would be dancers that had been doing the chorus part for a while. So they would rehearse the new girls and they would coach them and all that stuff. And it's definitely something that the company does, and it's passed down.
Yeah.
Right.
I just called them ballet masters as a force of habit. Of course, they're rehearsal directors. I realized afterwards, I was like, duh.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tangent, but Denise, your rehearsal director, is one of the most fascinating, wild, eccentric, just completely committed people I've ever seen in a room, working in a room.
Yeah, I would say one of the reasons why I wanted to join the company is when I took my first class with her in that workshop, or even over the summer course. She had so much energy, and she seemed like one of those people that really kept it real. She wasn't going to beat around the bush with how she taught and how she gave information and how she coached. She's very passionate when she's when she's really feeling it. That's when she's really the best. Denise definitely was a prime figure in my early days of Graham.
Right. I know she's always been a big supporter of yours, and that you worked on, I'm guessing, some of your first soloist principal featured roles. What were some of those roles, and how did you get prepared for them to take them on stage?
So I guess the first one was soloist part of Chronicle, which is Steps leader of Steps in the Street. Basically it was just a lot of looking at different videos of former dancers doing the role and sort of trying to apply it to my body. But also, since that was my first Graham role that I learned, Denise was definitely very hands-on in terms of coaching me. And what I liked about the way she coached me was that, she understood that Graham was something I was still learning. So she was like, because actually Steps in the Street was the role that she originated. She actually created that role.
Oh, wow.
Choreography, basically. So she was like, just try this. She would basically make it so I could do things that worked for my body. By the time the performances came around, I mean, I wouldn't say that it was super Graham. I mean, technique wasn't totally there. What was there? The emotion, the feeling, the intensity behind the movement. I think that's my strong suit. Sort of understanding the story of Chronicle, which is about women fighting, in the midst of war or battle. I feel like she saw that in me and helped me with that. Then other parts like Cave of the Heart or Chorus Woman in Cave of the Heart. That's something that she really worked with me on. And that role is very interesting. I wish I could describe it in words, but it's one of those pieces that you really just have to see. But she worked with me very much on that, and that's a very technical role. So I learned a lot technically doing that role, and that was my second year in the company. And then I'd say the biggest role that she worked with me on was the principal role in Chronicle.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because I started as a soloist in Chronicle, and then my last kind of big role that I have done was principal role. So she worked with me on that because that role is about, it's very complicated in terms of working with a large costume, a large skirt, working with the set, and basically being on stage by yourself for 10 minutes for the first solo, and then 10-ish minutes, 10 or almost more than 10 minutes for the second half. It's a lot of dancing, and she kind of left me to my own devices on the part that's not with the skirt. Prelude to Action is what that section is called. but Spectre is a very big, it's a very important role in the Graham Rep, and just working with the skirt, figuring out how it works, and also just understanding the feeling behind the dancing. She was definitely there with me in the room working on that. So.
You mentioned her helping you find things that worked for your body. And I wonder, especially when these things are being passed down, like we know that, not to bring it back to balancing again, but just that there can be such specifics about how the choreography is done. How is that with Graham? Are you more flexible in terms of like, here are different options we could put on your body, you kind of get to choose? How does that work?
I think it's just different choices choreographically. I think like when you have, for instance, like an attitude turn with a spiral, like you could either go very deep into the plie, or you could just go quick into it, into the leg fan afterwards. Like, you know, there are just different nuances, things you can play with.
I see.
That I think Denise was very open to letting a dancer explore. Also, same for Janet too, the director. She has like a Broadway background. So for instance, like when she would coach me on Chronicle Spectre with the skirt, you know, there are a lot of moments that are so subtle that every dancer does differently.
Right.
And she was like, I see this for you. I see you wanting to do it a little bit more strong, you know, telling the audience exactly what it is that you want to say right off the bat. Whereas some dancers take a more subtle approach. So it's about feeling, it's about technique, choices. It's about, you know, finding your interpretations and how you want to approach a move with a certain story in your head. It's actually quite broad. The way dancers interpret roles in the company, because you usually learn them from videos. And also a lot of the roles, the directors maybe not have it done, you know, so they only give you their interpretation.
Sure.
So you have to do a lot of work, take responsibility for your own work a lot of the time.
So it's not so much like, oh, that attitude turn, like I can't do that or whatever, let's do an arabesque turn. Like it's not so much changing the actual choreography as like the approach to it. Gotcha.
So I feel like, I mean, my experience with the Graham dancers, you guys are probably the hardest workers I've ever met. And that carries over into taking on a lot of additional work outside of the company too. You guys are just always working, and you're always doing different projects and exploring different avenues for your different talents. So what are some of the things that you've done outside of the company recently that have sort of fed you artistically, or like different new ways of working, or different from what you're doing at Graham that you've been enjoying?
So I do a lot of work sort of I try to incorporate my dance into as many forms of art as possible. So, for instance, my favorite things that I've done is I've worked a lot in the fashion world, and I've done a few fashion shows, or I've done like photo shoots, video projects that are sort of based in style and design. And I just love sort of putting my take on bringing a fashion story to life. So I've done a few things with some brands in New York that are very conceptual and high camp and very glamorous. And you know, when you have dance sort of mixed into fashion, it's like you're not just a model, you're a storyteller. You know, that's what I really like when it comes to executing certain looks and things, either a photo shoot or a video shoot. Also, I did some stuff in Paris that might be coming out soon, and also one that just came out that I did. I've been working with this very, very good friend of mine that I actually met doing a fashion show. He's like a stylist, creative director. His name is Alex IQ, and we do a lot of just like passion projects together. He brings a great team of artists together to just create looks and shoot them on film or on camera. And it's been really great sort of figuring out what it means to sort of imagine and be the conceptualizer, I guess you could say, behind certain stories that you want to tell.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool. And then also I've worked with this artist, Rashid Johnson, who did like an art exhibition at a local gallery in New York, but it started first at a gallery in Aspen. And we got to, for the opening of the gallery exhibition, me and Lloyd Knight did a dance show in inspiration with the exhibition. So
Right.
Cool.
that was really cool. Let's see. Yeah. And I just do a lot of my own stuff too. It's just fun to be creative in all ways, because I feel like my gram strength is that I am a storyteller, I think, and I have this sort of innate understanding for tapping into character roles, but also just like understanding the feeling behind a movement. So when I think about that, it really helps me do other things because they sort of inform each other.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. When you start talking about storytelling in your other like artistic outlets, like that is 100%, I think, what you bring to Graham. I just remember how breathtaking you were in that the opening of Chronicle. That was the first thing I ever saw you do. And yeah, you guys love to tell stories, but it's so beautiful. I think in ballet we get a little, I mean, there are factions, and I think our faction, maybe we tend to look down on storytelling.
Yeah.
But it's because sometimes in ballet, I feel like it's divorced from the movement, but you guys, like, it's just so they are one and the same. Yes. You can't have one without the other, and it's so compelling.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because when I watch like Balanchine ballets with no story, it's so funny because I feel a story when I watch it, which is really cool because I think that's probably the intent. Like, like it could be it could be interpreted in so many ways, but at least it's like a clear sort of base of beauty and composition that stir up emotions, that stir up feelings, So I think it's still storytelling without story, which I think is really
totally.
So we're going to get to our final segment of the interview where we do a lightning round. And we just ask you a few questions and you tell us the first thing you think of. Okay. So what is your favorite work in your repertoire so far?
It's either in Battle Garden or Chronicle.
Most memorable onstage moment?
I think just doing Chronicle. It just gives you chills down your spine. And as soon as that curtain goes up and you're sitting on the set and you lift your arms. The music starts. It goes, na-na-na, and you're like, oh my God. Literally chills up the spine. And I'll never forget that feeling.
What is your dream role that you have not yet danced?
Aaron to the Maze. It's a duet, and it's like a 15-minute nonstop for the time. But it's a beautiful story about overcoming fear. It's a Martha Graham ballet, and it's a beautiful story about overcoming fear. And there's a monster who plays who's like an archetype of fear that you battle, and it's a great.
Cool.
I love it.
So cool.
It's on YouTube. Check it out.
Okay.
Type in Aaron to the Maze, Martha Graham, Therese Capusili, Graham Legend. She does it.
Okay, we're on it. Do you have something that's been really getting you through COVID quarantine? Maybe a book, podcast, something you're doing?
So I like to, as we were saying prior to the interview, I like to just like create makeup looks and like dress up.
Yes.
And even though I have nowhere to go, I just love the feeling of just being like really dressed up for no reason. And it gives me a lot of joy. And I take pictures, or I'll just like call my friends, be like, look what this makeup look I did. I like to just have fun with it. So just anything that's creative, I guess, writing, drawing, creating makeup looks, things like that really help.
For wonderful coping mechanisms.
Just keep putting your looks out onto the gram so that we can feel the joy that you feel when you do them.
The Instagram, not the Martha gram.
Pun pun.
Do love
Wow.
a pun.
We are in our 30s. Not Leslie. Leslie, we won't drag you there yet. Thank you so much, Leslie. This was so great.
Oh my God, thank you. It's so much fun.
And we can't wait for everyone to fall in love with you the way we have.
You guys are great. It really is.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you for joining us this week. If you would like to support the Conversations on Dance podcast, there are a few ways that you can help. Click over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Download episodes when you listen to allow our analytics to better understand our listenership. Join our Facebook group, Conversations on Dance, Friends of the Pod, or you can offer a donation. Conversations on Dance has always been and will always be free to our listeners. You can help us continue to create and produce this unique behind-the-curtain look at the dance world by visiting conversationsondancepod.com/support. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.